Admiral Greenert, thank you so much for that introduction. I know that just about everybody here has met our new CNO, Admiral Greenert, and I will say what I said at his assumption of command, that I and everybody in the U.S. Navy will miss CNO Gary Roughead, and most of you knew, but the one person I thought was capable of building on what Gary Roughead had done and following in his footsteps and equaling the leadership is John Greenert. I think we have an outstanding Chief of Naval Operations. I want to welcome you all here today. I was thinking that one of my first places I went when I was a new Secretary of the Navy 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I came here to the International Seapower Symposium and did the welcome. And I looked out over the room and basically knew nobody. A lot of strange faces. And in the past 2.5 years, it's been my great pleasure, honor, to get to meet and work with a lot of the people here today. I see a lot of friendly faces. I see a lot of faces that I have seen both in this country and in your home countries. And I see a lot of faces that I hope I get to know better over the months to come, both here and in your home country. I was glad to see as many of you braved the elements last night to come to our reception on the LCS. And so I want to welcome you here, the 20th Annual International Seapower Symposium. In the 40 years that have occurred since the first symposium, which, by the way, 40 years ago, I was also, as the CNO said, here in Newport. I did not get invited to the first symposium. They didn't invite Lieutenant Junior grade to those things. But ISS, in that 40 years, has become increasingly important because our world has become so increasingly interconnected. The world is facing some economic issues, and it doesn't touch just one nation or one continent. It's affected every one of us. The boundaries of individual nations today are crisscrossed by global commerce and global telecommunications. But one area that has not changed is the importance of our global maritime commons. This has served as a link between all nations and all peoples throughout human history. Despite some amazing advances in technology and travel, more than 90% of all our trade, all the trade for the world, goes by sea. And despite incredible advances in satellite technology, more than 95% of all our telecommunications go under the sea. So ISS provides an incredibly valuable opportunity to discuss common concerns, common issues, common visions. Given the nature of the challenges we face, the only way we can manage our shared responsibilities of this century is to have interconnected partnerships. And those have to be strong partnerships. One of the challenges to every one of our countries have been economic, fiscal. My government, like virtually all governments, is wrestling with matching resources with requirements. But despite those challenges, one thing should be very clear. The United States Navy is and will continue to be a global presence wherever and whenever we are called upon. But the challenges we face today require us not to do things alone, not to do things by ourselves, but to work closely together, to deepen partnerships, to share responsibility, to protect and maintain our common interests together. In his speech last month to the United Nations, President Obama said that when we face global challenges, the U.S. will be part of a global response. He said, sometimes the course of history poses challenges that threaten our common humanity and common security. Responding to natural disasters, for example, or preventing genocide, keeping the peace, ensuring regional security, and maintaining the flow of commerce. In such cases, we should not be afraid to act, but the burden of action should not be America's alone. And what he just described, responding to natural disasters, keeping the peace, ensuring regional security, maintaining the flow of commerce, he could have been describing maritime services. As you look across the seas and in every geographic region, in the time since we were last together 2 years ago, there are numerous examples of where our maritime services are doing just that. On both coasts of Africa, Africa Partnership Station with 34 participating nations. In the Caribbean and South America, Southern Partnership Station, Panamax, Continuing Promise, Amphibious Southern Partnership Stations. These exercises and deployments range from humanitarian assistance to information sharing to high-end combat exercises. In the Pacific Partnership, exercise Uchi Freedom Guardian, disaster relief across that great ocean, and forward deploying littoral combat ships like the one we were on last night in the Pacific, and RIMPAC, the world's largest multinational maritime exercise. In Europe and the Mediterranean, the Libya operation that so many people, so many countries here were part of, and forward deploying Aegis guided missile destroyers. These ongoing operations, these ongoing exercises around the world serve to strengthen our maritime partnerships, and all are aimed at our common goals, achieving those goals that we all share as members of the Maritime Commons. I have to say that our individual leadership is also globally deployed. I see representatives from our Navy that live far from the United States sitting here today. Since I took office in May of 2009, I've traveled over 370,000 air miles to more than 50 countries. I've gone on board more than 50 U.S. ships and dozens of foreign naval vessels. In fact, I'm convinced that I'm now suffering some sort of permanent jet lag. In Admiral Greener's first 3 weeks as the new CNO, he spent 1/3 of it in the air. He went to sea. He met a dozen of his counterparts, 10 heads of Navy. So, CNO, after you hit the first 100,000 miles, come to see me. We'll talk. Now, when I travel internationally, my first priority, as yours is to see our sailors and our Marines and visit with them. But I also think it's incumbent on all of us as leaders to engage and seek out new ways to work together. Sometimes opportunities that we do not seek are thrust upon us. Piracy, really off-sided example of a threat to all our interests that we are responding to with common purpose and with some considerable success. We've all paid the price of piracy, whether off the Horn of Africa, in the Gulf of Aden, or beyond. Lives have been lost. The cost of doing business has gone up, and time and effort have been devoted to this when it could have been spent in other worthwhile endeavors. We've also worked together in responding to some recent humanitarian crises. 10 nations came together to respond to the devastating earthquake in Haiti. Nations from around the world, thousands of sailors were involved in the recovery and relief efforts following the earthquake and tsunami in Japan. And as Admiral Greenert talked about, I think there's another area where the risk we face presents us with an opportunity to cooperate. I've had the honor of visiting, as I mentioned, scores of countries. My role as Navy Secretary, and it's been rare when I went to a place where energy didn't come up as a topic of concern. Energy insecurity is increasingly affecting how the world looks at its relationships. Governments and military across the world recognize that energy can be used offensively and defensively as a weapon, denying an adversary access to critical energy stores, and that every military can be vulnerable to disruptions in energy supplies or budget impacts due to price shocks. We're pursuing some advanced fuel alternatives in the United States Navy. We have the opportunity to strengthen a lot of relationships with those, almost all of us, who understand the advantages of energy security. When the U.S. Navy launches the Great Green Fleet, these partnerships will be an integral part of our future force, providing safe refueling ports and economic relationships with countries with whom we share a common vision. We've also made a whole lot of strides in the last 2 years since we got together in our ability to operate together, using same systems or platforms, making sure those systems and platforms can communicate, can work together, can be a part of a seamless whole. Last night I was glad to see so many of you, as I said, came out in a pretty bad rainstorm to come aboard one of our newest ships, a littoral combat ship, LCS-2, USS Independence. That kind of ship is a major part of the future of our Navy and of all navies. You have to be fast, you have to be agile, you have to be flexible, you have to have a smaller crew, modular systems that can be changed quickly and can support missions all the way from high-end combat to disaster relief. You have to be able to operate in shallow littoral waters, but also capable of doing blue water operations as well. You have to be able to defeat things like mine warfare and surface warfare and submarine warfare. When I became Secretary of the United States Navy 2.5 years ago, I looked out at the smallest fleet that America's had since 1916. And as CNO mentioned, I've tried to make rebuilding our fleet one of my top priorities. And we've gone from building around 5 ships a year to building more than 11 ships a year currently. But to do that, you have to get good value. You have to get a fair price for the ships that you purchase. And I think that the ship you were on last night the OCS serves in this country as a template for how you can do that. Working together with us, industry was able to dramatically reduce the cost of that ship. And because of that, we're able to buy more ships faster, and American taxpayers saved almost $3 billion on the first 20 ships that are under contract now. These are just some of the things that we have done to work together, to cooperate with each other. And I think it's incumbent upon us as leaders of maritime services to continue to seek out as many ways as we can to work. Common bond, regardless of your country, regardless of your continent, regardless of geography, there's a common bond that exists between sailors. Because in many ways, we are one culture. We share a tradition more than 2 millennia in the making. Much of that tradition is largely unchanged because these traditions are born out of the heritage of the sea. Sailors' lives are still governed to some large extent by the structures and the roles and the rules that guided the lives of our brethren hundreds, if not thousands, of years ago. Our history of shared experiences, a common seagoing culture, as well as our understanding of the global nature of our roles, our capabilities, go beyond just the boundaries of our individual countries. History has shown that the best response is almost always a response heard from many voices. More cooperation, more engagement results in more understanding, which is why I think this meeting, ISS, has been such an important event for the last 4 decades and will continue to play an incredibly important role in international maritime cooperation. There's no other place that gives the naval leadership of the world the opportunity to see each other face to face, sailor to sailor, talk about and address the concerns that we all share, the problems that we all face, the issues that we all have to deal with. So I'm glad you're here, and I encourage you to make the most of our time together. And I know that you have. Our shared heritage of the sea provides us a common ground to meet our collective challenges. It is on this ground that we will succeed against those challenges. So in the common language of sailors from time immemorial, I wish you fair winds following seas. Thank you very much.